So tonight I'm going to talk to you about peer-assisted learning strategies, or PALS. It's a reading intervention that I've done quite a bit of work on. Actually, I started in my doctoral program doing research on PALS, and I've continued to do some work with PALS over my time here at the U of M. And some of the most compelling data have come from my work on PALS, and also some of the key lessons that I apply to other work that I'm doing. So I'd like to share some of those with you guys tonight. Okay. So PALS stands for Peer-Assisted Learning Strategies, and basically it's a class-wide peer tutoring approach that makes use of one of the most abundant resources in classrooms, which is the students themselves. So in a general education classroom, kids are partnered together such that a higher performing reader is paired with a lower performing reader to engage in some structured reading activities that focus on critical reading skills that they need to develop. So fluency, comprehension, those kinds of things. And everybody in the classroom can participate. PALS was really designed to sort of accommodate the diversity of many different learners within a classroom. So kids with disabilities, kids who have difficulties with learning, kids with English language learning needs, and so it's designed for a diverse group of students. It was originally developed by Drs. Doug and Lynn Fuchs at Vanderbilt University, along with their colleagues, and over 2 decades of research have demonstrated the efficacy of PALS in a lot of different kinds of settings for a lot of different types of learners. And for that reason, the U.S. Department of Education has recognized PALS as a best practice. So some of the reasons why I think PALS is especially effective are, first of all, that it's very simple. It's one of the simplest interventions that I know of. It's sort of brilliant in its simplicity. There's a set of very structured, simple procedures that kids learn, and once they know those procedures, they can apply them to pretty much any text that they would encounter in school. It's very simple, it's structured, there's a lot of routines, and for those reasons it's also very engaging. It's kind of fast-paced. Hopefully kids are engaged in the interesting books that they read. They read real texts that could be stories, could be nonfiction about topics they're interested in. And they get to work with a partner, and I think a lot of kids discover that it's actually fun to read with another kid your same age. But the biggest reason why I think PALS is effective is because kids practice reading a lot. So they read for about 30 to 40 minutes 3 times a week. They're either reading out loud to their partner, they're listening and following along as their partner reads to them, and then they're thinking about the text and they're answering comprehension questions. So this kind of sustained practice that they engage in is really essential for kids who need to develop reading fluency and comprehension skills. I would never say, though, that PALS is a panacea or that it will work for all children in all classrooms. One thing we do know, though, from research is that PALS is more likely to work when teachers implement it with fidelity to its core components. So when they implement it the way it's supposed to be implemented as it was designed by the original developers. And we know from some research and theoretical backgrounds of PALS that some of the components, not all of them, are particularly essential to kids' reading outcomes. So that includes a partner reading component, where the stronger reader models reading fluently for about 5 minutes, and then the weaker reader repeats and reads the same text for 5 minutes. Then they do a paragraph shrinking approach, where they're just reading paragraphs and summarizing those paragraphs to identify the main idea, and there's a very specific way that they do that. The dosage of PALS is very important, so at least 30 minutes 3 times per week for a minimum of 16 to 18 weeks is the recommended dosage based on work that we've done. And then positive reinforcement is built into PALS. So there's a point system where kids are just reinforced for doing different parts of the activities. So those are considered the core PALS components. Other aspects are included, but those seem to be the ones that get the biggest bang for the buck, so to speak. Now, much of the research that's been done over the past 2 decades has been done on a relatively small scale, so in a couple districts at a time, maybe with several different schools. And so colleagues of mine, the Fuchs at Vanderbilt, who originally developed PALS, Lauda Sines, who's down in South Texas at the University of Texas Pan American, and me here at the University of Minnesota worked together to do the Scaling Up project. It actually took place over about 5 years. We worked with kindergarten first, and then we moved up to grades 2 through 5. And here's what the study looked like. They would continue to implement PALS by the book, or whether they would customize PALS. So they would be able to have the chance to tailor PALS to their individual students' needs, to their particular curriculum, their classroom needs, their particular teaching style. We just had a couple of caveats for when they customized PALS. So for one thing, they still had to implement those 4 core components that I pointed out with fidelity. So there were some aspects that they couldn't change. They were strongly encouraged to change many other aspects of PALS, but we strongly encouraged them to use classroom data to support those changes. So they had to look at their student progress over time and justify making a change based on their student performance. So they did that for another year. We had the by-the-book teachers, the customized PALS teachers, and we still had the control group. We pre- and post-tested all of their students. I'm going to walk you through a series of bars here. Now that gold bar is the students overall. The maroon bar is the low-performing students. The gray bar is average-performing readers, and the black bar is high-performing readers. So that suggested to us that there was something about customizing PALS that made teachers differentiate to meet the different needs of their students. There was something about what they did, and they did lots of different things, by the way. We didn't tell them just do this one change. They could make whatever change they wanted as long as they could justify it based on data. And some of the teachers did some interesting things, and some of them did some really great things. And so it just seemed that them having that opportunity to use their judgment and the flexibility to make changes had an impact on student outcomes. And we saw a similar pattern when we looked at the customized PALS students versus the PALS students whose teachers did it by the book. Again, with the low achieving students seeming to experience the greatest benefit. So I find this result pretty compelling, especially at a time, and those of you who have been in schools or taking courses here probably hear a lot about fidelity. Fidelity is important. So now I've sort of moved away a little bit from doing research on PALS and have started to do some more intensive intervention work with kids who are at risk or identified as having disabilities. But I always take away or apply some key lessons that I've learned from my work with PALS that I think are really important to consider in developing interventions in general. And those are my lessons from PALS.